Sierra Stanton didn't notice she had dropped her phone until she was already halfway across the marble floor of the high-end mall's designer wing, her arms full of discounted home decor from a pop-up inside Nordstrom. "Oh no," she muttered, patting her coat pockets and yanking open her oversized tote bag. "No phone." Seriously, she whipped around, eyes scanning the rows of polished storefronts and sparkling chandeliers. Shoppers drifted by in a blur of luxury bags and winter coats. She retraced her steps in a hurry, heels clicking against the tile, heart pounding. That phone had everything: her job contacts, her calendar, her rent reminder. If someone had picked it up, "It's yours, isn't it?" The voice stopped her in her tracks. Deep calm and far too confident. She turned and her breath caught. He was tall, all sharp lines in a tailored navy coat, holding her phone like it was something delicate. His hair was dark and tousled like it had been styled by accident, and his eyes were piercing, serious. Everything about him screamed expensive, from the leather watch on his wrist to the way he stood like he owned the floor beneath him. "Yes," Sierra said quickly, reaching out, cheeks flushed. "Thank you. I didn't even notice you were halfway down the escalator when I saw it fall," he said, handing it to her. Their fingers brushed, his gaze didn't move from her face. "Unlocked, no passcode," she laughed nervously. "I mean, who's gonna steal it in a place like this? People surprise you," he said, but there was something amused in his tone now. "You should be more careful." "I usually am," she replied, tucking the phone into her coat pocket. "Thanks, really." "Anytime," he said, and that was it. He nodded and turned, walking toward the glass elevator like he had a meeting waiting on the top floor. Sierra watched him go, her pulse still racing. She didn't know his name, but something about him lingered. Quinn Bishop stepped into the back seat of his black Bentley, tugging off his gloves. "Find out who she is," he said to his assistant, who sat beside him with a tablet already in hand. "The woman with the phone," she dropped it. "No lock. I saw her calendar. She freelances in marketing. Name's Sierra Stanton. I want a full background." The assistant blinked. "Sir, she's not like the women at those charity galas," Quinn muttered, glancing at the phone he'd held minutes ago. "She didn't even recognize me. She didn't?" "No." He leaned back, closing his eyes. "And I want to know why that feels so damn refreshing." That night, Sierra sat at her tiny kitchen table in her studio apartment, staring at her phone and telling herself not to obsess. The stranger was probably just some rich guy who worked in finance. The mall was crawling with them. Still, something about his eyes, the way he looked at her like she wasn't just another face in the crowd. She shook her head and opened her laptop. Rent was due in 4 days, and she had 2 unpaid invoices and 1 client ghosting her. She couldn't afford to daydream about mall strangers. 2 days later, Sierra walked into a downtown cafe for a meeting with a potential new client. A woman named Natalie had reached out about branding help for a startup skincare line. Finally, someone who responded. She stepped inside, brushing snow from her coat, and spotted a sharply dressed woman waving at her from a corner table. "Sierra, right? I'm Natalie," the woman said, standing to shake her hand. "Thanks for coming, of course. I'm excited to hear more about the brand." They ordered drinks and dove into ideas. Sierra was in her element, talking color palettes, social media strategy, and campaign rollouts. For the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe things were turning around. 20 minutes in, Natalie's phone buzzed. "Sorry, 1 sec," she said, glancing at the screen. Then her eyes widened. "Oh, Quinn's coming to join us. He likes to meet all consultants before we finalize anything." Sierra's stomach turned. "Quinn Bishop, CEO of Bishop & Co. He's funding the launch." Sierra froze. That name, Bishop. Wait, that man at the mall, wasn't he wearing a designer coat with a tiny embroidered B on the inside collar? The cafe door opened, and in walked the same man who'd handed her phone back 2 days ago. Her heart nearly stopped. He saw her instantly. His eyes lit up just a flicker, and then he smiled. Not polite or corporate, real. He walked straight to their table. "Sierra," he said like he already knew her. "Nice to see you again." "Hi," she said, voice a little too breathless. "You two know each other?" Natalie asked, looking between them. "She dropped her phone," Quinn said, pulling out a chair. "I picked it up," Sierra cleared her throat. "And you didn't mention you were a CEO, you didn't ask." Natalie looked amused. Well, I guess this makes things easier. Quinn leaned forward, eyes still on Sierra. I already like her work. Let's move forward with the contract. Sierra blinked. Wait, really? I know talent when I see it. Natalie grinned. Well, that was fast. Quinn said nothing, but he didn't look at the proposal packet. He looked at Sierra like he already knew she was going to change something in his life. That night, he sent a car to pick her up for dinner. He didn't ask. He sent a note with the driver. I don't usually chase people, but I'm not letting this feeling go. She told herself not to go, but she went. The restaurant was on the rooftop of a 5-star hotel. The view of the city sparkled beneath them, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. Quinn stood when she arrived, dressed in a slate gray suit, holding a glass of wine. You didn't have to do all this, she said, stunned by the place. I did, he said simply. I wanted to see you again. She sat across from him, the candlelight making his features look even sharper. You don't even know me. I know you didn't care that I was a CEO. You didn't pretend to be impressed. You were real. That's rare. I'm not exactly the kind of woman who fits in places like this. You fit here, he said without hesitation. Because you're here, she looked away, trying to hide her smile. You're intense. I know what I want, he said. And I want to know everything about you. Sierra's stomach flipped. She'd never had a man look at her like that, not with hunger but with curiosity, like she wasn't something to own, but something to understand, and despite her better judgment, she wanted to let him. You're quiet, Quinn said, folding his hands on the white linen tablecloth. That's unusual for someone who negotiates branding campaigns for a living. Sierra reached for her water glass, the stem cool between her fingers. Usually I'm not having dinner with someone who makes executive decisions before I finish the pitch. He tilted his head. Are you telling me I made a mistake? No, she said, meeting his gaze. I'm saying I don't trust easy wins. I don't offer them often. The waiter stepped in then, placing plates in front of them, hers a delicate arrangement of roasted vegetables and risotto, his a seared cut of steak with a side of truffle potatoes. Quinn waited until the server faded into the background before speaking again. What would you have done if I hadn't shown up at that cafe? Probably gone home and kept chasing invoices, Sierra replied. Why? I was wondering if things like this ever happened to you. She set her fork down. Things like what? Chance meetings that rewrite the direction of your week. He leaned forward slightly. Or maybe your year. You think a dropped phone is enough to rewrite someone's year? I think some people show up exactly when they're supposed to. Sierra blinked, unsure whether to be flattered or suspicious. You don't even know if I'm good at what I do. I've seen your work, he said. I had someone pull your client history. Your campaign's triple engagement. Your visuals are clean. Your voice is consistent. You're better than most firms we've paid 5 times as much. Her spine stiffened. You had someone investigate me. I had someone vet you, he corrected. For the contract, right, she said, clearly unconvinced. He paused, then said more softly, I didn't expect to be this curious about the person behind the portfolio. The words settled between them, and this time Sierra didn't rush to fill the silence. Why me? She asked after a moment. You could have anyone. Maybe that's the problem. He didn't look away. I have everything except what I can't buy. She pushed her plate aside. So what, you decided to pursue the first woman who didn't immediately swoon. I decided to pursue the first woman who didn't pretend. Sierra stood, gathering her coat. I don't play games, Quinn, and I don't climb ladders by flirting with the man at the top. He rose too. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking? He hesitated before answering. A week, no contracts, no business, just time. To do what? To see if this, whatever this is, deserves a second look. Sierra studied him, the snow-dusted skyline glinting behind him. I don't get swept away easily. I don't sweep, he said. I earn, she exhaled. You've got 7 days. I'll send a driver at 10 tomorrow. She gave a small nod before turning to leave. Quinn watched her disappear into the elevator, the echo of her heels fading. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Clear my schedule for the week, and tell security to update clearance for a guest named Sierra Stanton. The next morning, Sierra opened her closet, staring at it like it belonged to someone else. Nothing in it screamed, spend the day with a billionaire. Still, she chose a soft black sweater and dark jeans, pinned her hair back and dabbed on lipstick before stepping into the waiting town car. The driver said nothing as he took her through the city and up into the hills, where the streets narrowed and the gates grew higher. When they pulled into a private drive, she sat frozen for a moment, staring at the estate set back against the trees, all glass and steel and quiet grandeur. Quinn stood at the door, sleeves rolled, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You said 10, he said, offering one. "It's 10:03, you timed me. I appreciate punctuality." Sierra took the mug. "What is this place?" "My house." She followed him inside, eyes scanning the minimalist interior. Everything was open, filled with natural light and sleek lines. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto a terrace with a view that made her breath catch. "You live alone?" she asked. "I work late." "It's easier." He led her through the space, past a private library and a room that looked like a personal gallery until they reached a sunlit studio with blank canvases and stacked sketchbooks. "This doesn't look like a boardroom," she said. "It isn't." "I wanted to show you something." He handed her a sketch pad. The pages were filled with designs, product branding, logos, packaging mock-ups. "You draw." "I used to," he said. "Before the company took over everything. These are incredible." "I wanted to create once," he said, watching her as she flipped through, "but I ended up building a machine instead." She closed the book. "Why show me this?" "Because you still create," he said. "And I miss what that feels like." Sierra looked up at him. "You're not what I expected, neither are you," she hesitated. "I'm not here to be impressed by your house." "Good," he said. "Then maybe you'll be honest with me." "About what?" "About whether you feel it too." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked toward the terrace, letting the door swing open behind her. The wind was cold, but she didn't mind. It cleared her head. He followed after a moment, standing beside her, silent. "When I dropped my phone," she said, "I didn't think it would lead here." "Neither did I." She turned to him. "I don't let people in easily." "I'm not asking for easy," he replied. "I'm asking for real." Their eyes met, and something shifted, not a spark. A pull, a quiet, steady pull neither of them could ignore. The third day began with a knock on Sierra's apartment door. She opened it, expecting the delivery she hadn't ordered, and instead found Quinn standing there, holding a long, narrow box wrapped in silver paper. "You're early," she said, surprised, "and you know where I live." "I had someone drop off your last invoice payment," he said, handing her the box. "I figured I'd deliver this myself." "I didn't order anything." "I know, open it." She hesitated but pulled the ribbon. Inside was a single brush flat, sable-tipped, hand painted with her initials at the base. She looked up, brows drawn. "I saw your sketchbook on your kitchen shelf," he said. "The one with the taped spine. You haven't touched it in a while." "You went through my things." "I looked around while I waited for you to grab your coat yesterday," he said, unapologetic. "You said you don't create for others." "I thought maybe you just needed the right tools to start again." "Guilt tripping me into painting, Mr. Bishop." "No," he said, "reminding you it's still yours if you want it." She closed the box slowly. "You don't strike me as sentimental." "I'm not," he said, "but I notice things. Like how you tap your pen twice before you speak, or how you never order the same coffee twice." She stepped back to let him in. "So this is your approach, observation and very specific gifts." "No, this is just me trying to keep pace with you." As she set the box on the counter, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and sighed. "I need to take this. It's a potential client." He nodded and moved to the window, hands in his pockets. By the time she hung up, her shoulders were tight. "Bad call?" he asked without turning. "No, just complicated. A company that wants me to manage their social campaign, but insists I come into the office every day, even though the project's remote. They said they'd need to monitor my hours. Sounds like they don't want a consultant, they want control." She leaned against the counter. "You ever deal with people like that?" "Every fiscal quarter," he said. "I fire them." She laughed under her breath. "Must be nice." "It's not, but it's necessary." She watched him for a moment, the way he stood so still, as though he'd learned restraint the hard way. "Why did you really come here, Quinn?" "I wanted to see where you live, where you work. I wanted to understand what grounds you when everything else feels temporary." That's a lot to ask from a woman you met 3 days ago. He turned then, his expression unreadable. I don't think time matters when you already know you're in trouble. For the first time, she didn't deflect. What kind of trouble? The kind where silence feels louder when you're not in the room, he said. And I don't like silence, she blinked, throat tight. He came closer, but not too close. I have a meeting downtown. It'll take a few hours. Will you be here when it's done? She nodded slowly. I will. He left without another word, but something about the air in the apartment felt different after he was gone. Lighter. Like the weight of her own guardedness had shifted. Later that evening, she met him at a gallery opening in Tribeca. He hadn't told her it was formal, but when she arrived in her simple black dress, she found herself standing among gowns that shimmered and tuxedos pressed sharp as blades. He was speaking with several people near a sculpture installation, but his eyes found her the moment she walked in. You didn't warn me this was a fundraiser, Sierra said as he approached. You didn't ask, he said, offering his arm. Besides, you're the best-dressed person here. Don't lie. I don't need to. He introduced her to several people: an art dealer from Paris, a woman who ran a nonprofit in Nairobi, a former architect turned sculptor. Each time he introduced her not as a guest, but as his partner on an upcoming creative venture. And each time she realized he wasn't exaggerating, this wasn't a show. He was integrating her into his world. Why do they all look at me like I'm an anomaly? She whispered as they stepped away from a conversation. Because you are, he said. You don't orbit, you anchor. She stared at him. Do you always say things like that in public, only when I mean them? Quinn, I know, he said, cutting her off gently. It's fast, but I'm not trying to win a race. I'm trying to build something that doesn't fall apart just because it wasn't expected. She looked away, unsettled by how much she wanted to believe him. Before she could speak again, a woman approached them. Tall, elegant, with dark red lipstick and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Quinn, she said smoothly, didn't expect to see you here, especially with company. Monica, he said, his tone flat, didn't know you were back in the city. I came for the auction. Her eyes flicked to Sierra. I see you've replaced your silence with something more. Vocal, Sierra raised a brow. You must be fun at dinner parties. Quinn stepped in. Monica and I worked together years ago. It ended. So did his ability to take advice, Monica added, still smiling. Good luck with this one. She walked off before Sierra could reply. Sierra asked. Worse, he said. She wanted the company more than the connection. I gave her neither, she exhaled. That was enlightening. I don't keep secrets, he said, but I don't dig up graves unless there's something worth finding. And is there? Not with her, he said. But maybe with you. They didn't stay much longer. As they stepped into the car, Sierra didn't speak right away. Why me, Quinn? She asked again, quietly this time. He looked at her, his voice lower than before. Because you make me want to remember who I was before I became what everyone expected. She turned to the window, heart thudding. She wasn't ready to say it, but the truth pressed at her ribs. This wasn't just a spark. It was a match tossed into dry grass, and she was already burning. Sierra stood in the middle of Quinn's private rooftop garden, the wind brushing through the low hedges and soft lantern light, painting golden arcs over the stone path. The skyline glittered around them like a jeweled cage, and the hush of the city below felt surreal. He had brought her here after the gallery, the car ride charged with a silence neither of them dared to break. I didn't know this was up here, she said quietly, turning in place. You never mentioned it. I don't bring people here, Quinn said, his voice steady. Actually, no one's been up here but me, she looked at him. Why now? Because I wanted you to see where I come when I can't breathe. Sierra's chest tightened. You hide. I come here to remember I'm still human. She walked toward the edge, resting her hands on the cool railing. You don't seem like someone who forgets that. You think I'm grounded. No, she said, glancing over her shoulder. I think you're trying to be. He moved to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. I built everything because I thought power would solve the emptiness. I thought if I could control every variable, I'd never feel helpless again. She didn't speak, sensing the weight of what he was about to say. My father lost everything when I was 19. His business, our home, our name. I watched him unravel while people pretended not to notice. I swore I'd never be that exposed again. Sierra turned to face him fully. That's why you built Bishop and Co. It started as revenge, he admitted. Then it became a machine. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what I was trying to protect. You're not the only one who's been hurt by trust, she said, her voice softer now. But I've learned that building walls eventually locks you inside. He nodded slowly, his hand brushing against hers without expectation. Then maybe it's time I learned something from you. She searched his face, the truth in it. You already are, the moment stretched, something unspoken binding them tighter than before. But then her phone buzzed in her pocket. She stepped back, pulled it out. Her face fell. What is it? He asked. My landlord. I forgot to send the updated lease. If I don't sign it tonight, he moves on to the next applicant. You're still looking for a permanent place? I was hoping the deal with Natalie would give me enough stability to finally stop bouncing between sublets. Quinn's expression shifted. Why didn't you tell me? Because I'm not your responsibility. No, but you matter. She tucked her phone away. I should go. He touched her arm. Come with me first, just for a few minutes. Where? I want to show you something. She hesitated, then nodded. They took the elevator down, stepping into the underground parking level where one of his drivers waited with the engine running. The ride was short, the city blurring past. When they stopped, they were in front of a modern building tucked between two high rises. The doorman opened the glass doors without question. Quinn, what is this? He led her inside, past the lobby and into a private elevator that climbed to the top floor. When the doors opened, she stepped out into a penthouse unlike anything she'd seen. It was empty, unfurnished, quiet. White walls, tall windows, clean slate. I bought this place a few months ago, he said. For no reason, really. I thought maybe I'd use it as a retreat, but I never stepped foot in it again. She turned, eyes wide. Why are we here? Because you should live here. She stared at him. You're not serious. I am. Quinn, I can't accept that. You wouldn't be accepting it. You'd be investing back into yourself. No strings, no favors, just stability. She shook her head. That's not how I do things. Then do it differently. He took a step closer. Let this be the moment you let someone stand beside you, not in front of you. You barely know me. I know enough to be sure. She backed away, her chest rising and falling. I don't want to owe you. You don't. But I want the chance to earn your trust. When she didn't answer, he added, if the roles were reversed and I was on the edge of something better, would you offer me a way across? She swallowed, the tears behind her eyes threatening to fall. Yes. Then let me do the same. She looked around the empty space, saw herself in it working late at the kitchen counter, painting by the windows, not worrying about the next eviction notice or choosing between groceries and client meetings. I'll think about it, he nodded. That's all I ask. They stood in the silence of the penthouse, the city wrapped around them like a living promise. The next morning, Sierra returned with a list of questions: maintenance costs, utilities, the building's policies. She asked because she needed to feel like this was a decision, not a gift. Quinn answered everyone without hesitation. By the end of the week, she stood in the doorway of her new home, keys in hand, and turned to find him already waiting with a bottle of champagne. You believed in me before I did, she said, watching him pour the glasses. No, he replied. You believed in yourself, I just reminded you. She raised her glass. So what now? He stepped closer, slid his free hand to her waist. Now I ask you to be mine, not because I found your phone. Not because I made you a promise, but because I've never wanted anything more. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for his. You already are, and she kissed him, not because the moment called for it, but because every part of her had already fallen. A year later, the same rooftop garden bloomed in spring. Candles lined the path and petals trailed toward a soft-lit archway. Sierra stood in a satin dress, her hand in Quinn's as vows passed between them like secrets. He didn't promise her forever with grand illusions. He promised presence. Partnership, peace, the kind of love that doesn't sweep in like a storm but stays steadfast, long after the winds die down, and she, the girl who once thought stability was for someone else, stood at the center of it all, not as a prize, but as the woman he chose. The one who never needed saving, only the space to rise. They kissed beneath the stars, and the city whispered around them. She'd dropped her phone, and found everything else. Sierra adjusted the cuff of her ivory blazer as she stood beside the glass conference table, the city skyline behind her a blur of steel and sky. The boardroom was quiet now, the meeting concluded, and every executive who'd once doubted her strategy had just signed off on a rebrand campaign she had built from scratch. She turned toward Quinn, who leaned casually against the wall near the door, his gaze fixed solely on her. His tie was loosened, his jacket draped over one shoulder, and there was a look in his eyes she hadn't seen in months, not admiration, not pride, something deeper, something still. "You didn't say anything the entire time," she said, stepping toward him. "You didn't need me to," he replied. "You've already become the person I knew you were from day one." She crossed her arms, though the gesture held no real edge. "That sounds suspiciously close to an I told you so," he grinned. "Maybe. But I've earned the right." Sierra laughed, the tension from the meeting finally slipping from her shoulders. That was the last piece. The campaign's greenlit and the funding's locked. It's actually happening. He walked to her, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Of course it is." "You didn't just build a brand, you built a movement." She tilted her head. "You always speak in declarations, only when I'm right." They rode the elevator down in comfortable silence, the kind that came from knowing there was nothing left to prove. She leaned into his side and he laced their fingers together. Outside, a car waited, but Sierra tugged him toward the sidewalk instead. "Let's walk," she said. "I want to feel the pavement under my shoes today." They strolled through the city, passing storefronts and cafes, the late afternoon sun casting everything in amber. As they neared the riverfront, she slowed. "I've been thinking," she said quietly. "That's usually dangerous. I want to do something new." Quinn stopped beside her. "Define new." "I've spent so much of my life reacting, waiting for jobs, waiting for rent extensions, waiting for approval. I don't want to wait anymore." He tucked his hands into his pockets. "What are you proposing?" "I want to open my own firm, full creative control, my name on the door." He didn't ask if she was sure. He didn't question the risk. He just said, "What do you need?" "I was going to pitch it to investors next quarter." Quinn shook his head. "You don't need investors. You need a partner who believes in you, and if you'll have me, I want in." She stared up at him, stunned. "Seriously? You've proven yourself 10 times over. This isn't about money. It's about building something that's yours, and I want to be part of that." "You'd take a back seat." "Gladly. I'll handle the legal and financial structure. You take the lead." She blinked back, the sting in her eyes. "You really mean that?" "I want nothing more than to see you do what you were born to do. And if I get to stand beside you while you do it, that's more than enough." They kissed then, right there on the sidewalk, the world moving around them in slow motion. It wasn't a kiss of urgency, it was one of certainty. 2 months later, Stanton Creative opened its doors in a bright corner suite overlooking the East River. The launch was quiet but intentional, no billboards, no press blitz. Just Sierra, a handpicked team, and a vision sharpened by every no she'd ever turned into a yes. Quinn never missed a team meeting, though he never tried to lead one. He worked 2 floors down in Bishop & Co.'s new satellite office, and their days bled into evenings filled with rooftop dinners, jazz records, and the kind of laughter that only came from knowing the worst was behind them. One evening, as she closed her laptop and turned to find him watching her from the doorway, she raised an eyebrow. "Should I be concerned that the CEO of a billion-dollar company spends most of his time loitering in his wife's office?" He walked in, holding a small velvet box. "I figured I should give you this before the night gets away from us." She narrowed her eyes playfully. "If that's a second engagement ring, I'm going to assume you lost the first." He opened the box. Inside sat a delicate gold pendant shaped like a stylized quill, her logo. "It's the first thing you ever designed for yourself," he said. "I had it cast, thought you'd want to carry it with you." She touched it gently. "You remember everything, only what matters." She stood, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You know, I used to think love was something that got in the way of ambition, that it dulled your edge. And now I know it sharpens it. The right love does anyway." He kissed her once deeply, then pulled back just enough to whisper, "Come home with me. I always do." That night, they returned to the penthouse overlooking the city, their home, now filled with color and warmth, a far cry from the sterile emptiness it once held. Paintings lined the walls, a record spun softly in the corner, and in the kitchen a bottle of wine waited, half finished from the night before. As they curled on the couch, bare feet tangled, Sierra looked up at him. "You ever miss the chase?" she asked. He brushed her hair back, his voice low. "Only when you're not beside me," she smiled, resting her head on his chest. "I think we finally caught something worth keeping." We did. They fell asleep like that, the city breathing around them, a quiet hum beneath the steady rhythm of two hearts that had stopped searching. Forever wasn't a promise in the distance anymore. It lived here, in every look, in every word, in every moment they chose each other again.